Diabetes Connections is brought to you by inhaled insulin, glucose management in the moment, by Omnipod, simplify life with Omnipod 5, and by Dexcom G7, the #1 covered CGM brand.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, Katie Bone is the youngest ever American Ninja Warrior Women's National winner. She is also a nationally ranked rock climber and has her eyes on the Olympics. But this is not a diabetes can never stop me, only positives story. At her young age, she's 17, Katie is very clear about the challenges she faces, like when a stubborn low blood sugar disrupted a national climbing competition.
And it was hard to just show up the next day and compete. But just living with type 1 is not easy, and then competing at a high level and competing in two sports is really hard as well. And then you put both together, it's hard. It's hard to just train and sometimes just show up to the gym.
Acknowledging those challenges seems to make Katie's story even more inspiring. We talk about the big win on Ninja Warrior, her recent injury, and what she's looking forward to next. And she answers a lot of your questions. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome, everybody, to another week of the show. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. I am your host, Stacey Sims, and like many of you, I first heard of Katie Bone when my Facebook feed was flooded with pictures of her and videos from competitions starting a couple of years ago. Rock climbing, American Ninja Warrior, culminating, of course, in that huge win, the women's competition national championship just a couple of weeks ago. Let's listen to it.
And Katie Bone pulling away, and she's done it. The 16-year-old type 1 diabetic is our winner, out-racing Abby Herman. Katie Bone is your new women's champion.
If you haven't seen it, I'm going to link up the video in the show notes. It is just a thrill, and her family, her supporters, are right there with her. Katie was diagnosed with type 1 at age 11. Her first question was, can I keep climbing? She could, of course, and a few years later, she started competing on American Ninja Warrior. Katie wears a Dexcom and an Omnipod, very visible when she competes, and as you'll hear, that is no accident. Now, the championship show, that clip you just heard, it was taped last year, May of 2020. I don't know about you, but I did not realize how far in advance they taped these things. Katie and her family has been sitting on the news this whole time. And as you'll hear, a lot has happened since then. She was badly injured earlier this year, and she has worked so hard to come back. She was in a climbing competition just a couple of weeks ago. I'll let Katie explain more about that experience and what she is looking forward to next. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Omnipod, and I'm amazed at how hard these automated insulin delivery systems work. Omnipod 5 automatically increases, decreases, or pauses insulin delivery every 5 minutes. The technology is called Smart Adjust, and it's in the pod. So that means if you're out on the football field and the controller is in your bag, the pod and the Dexcom G6 continue to talk and make adjustments. That would have been awesome for us in middle school when Benny played football, or when he was backstage at the school play. All of that, and you get the freedom of no tubes. Fill out the quick online form, see if you're eligible for a free trial. Go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions, also visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Katie, thank you so much for joining me. Boy, am I excited to talk to you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Well, first of all, congratulations. I know you're welcome. I know the win happened a while ago, but we just saw it. What was it like to hang on to that news for so long?
It was really hard. Like when I first got back from filming and I was at the gym and I was just like, I just won the women's championship and I can't tell anyone. And I knew that it was going to be a year-long wait. And then I just kind of moved on, not like forgot about it, but kind of forgot about it until we started getting photos and it was like coming up to air. So it like got easier because it just wasn't a thing that was on my mind anymore. But when I first got back, it was so hard to not mention it to anybody. And we also weren't really sure if we could tell people we compete on the women's championship. Like that was a very gray area. So that was also a little bit hard when I was doing my interviews. But it was a very long wait and I'm very happy that it finally aired.
Well, congratulations. It was really wild and fun to watch. We will talk a lot about American Ninja Warrior. I have lots of questions from listeners and I have questions of my own, but let's kind of back up. You have been athletic, it seems, your whole life, which is crazy to say to somebody who's only 17 years old. But even before your diabetes diagnosis, let's go back. Do you remember what got you interested in climbing?
So my brother, for his birthday, wanted to go to the climbing gym. He had been asking for a little while, and then he was like, this is what I want to do for my birthday. We walked in, and both of us just instantly fell in love. We did a summer camp and then joined the team later that year and started competing. And I just knew that it was the thing that I wanted to do for as long as I possibly could, whether that was competing or just climbing. It was just the thing that made me happy, and it felt right, and it felt like it was where I was supposed to be.
How old were you at your brother's birthday party?
I was about 8 years old.
And it was just a couple of years later that you were diagnosed with type 1. Would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed when I was 11 years old. I was at a big climbing competition like 3 days before. I did not feel well. I felt really sick. I climbed terribly, and we just did not know what was going on. Just thought maybe it was an off weekend, maybe I'm sick, whatever. And then a couple days later, we went to urgent care because I was showing symptoms, and then I was diagnosed.
Did anybody know anything about diabetes in your family? When you said showing symptoms, were people around you, was your mom or dad saying, oh boy, this could be diabetes, or was it really out of the blue for you guys?
My mom speculated it. She didn't tell me that at the time. Like, she's not going to tell her 11-year-old child that she maybe has diabetes. But my dad's mom, she had type 1 diabetes. I didn't know a lot about it. She was always really sick. She died of complications of it. So that was what I knew of diabetes, and I thought that was all it was. And so when I was diagnosed, it was terrifying because that's where my mind went. And my mom made sure to tell me that that was not going to be my diagnosis and that it was going to look very different for me. And that I knew I was going to climb again, but I was not sure really whether I would compete again and what that would look like and if I'd be able to perform at the same level. So it was definitely a really scary moment for me in terms of what can I do in climbing next and what can I still do with my life. I mean, I was only 11.
Yeah. Did any part of your care team, anybody say to you, you're going to be okay, you're going to go right back to climbing? Do you remember anyone encouraging you or discouraging you at the time?
My first question to the doctor was, when can I climb again? And the doctor did tell me that I would be able to climb really soon. I ended up climbing later that week. I remember what I was doing. I remember what the doctors looked like, and they said that it was diabetes. And all of a sudden, it felt like the world came crashing down and just everything I don't know. I remember what it felt like and how just broken I felt in that moment when she said that.
It's a terrifying diagnosis. My son was so tiny, he doesn't remember any of it, but I know as a parent, it was so devastating. When you were able to climb, later that week, did it start to come back to you that you'd be able to do this, or did it take longer? Was there another moment down the line when it really clicked for you?
I knew in the hospital. I knew that I was still going to be able to compete. When I wasn't really sure. I didn't know what my now training was going to look like and how I would respond to workouts and getting stronger and stuff. But I knew that I wanted to make this work because I knew I was going to be able to. I had people tell me about a few professional athletes who had type 1, and I thought that if they were able to achieve it all with type 1, I knew I could. I knew it was just going to look different, and it was just about figuring out how to do that and make that work. And my parents were all in to figure out what we could do next. It was just yes, but it was how.
That's a great way to put it. It was yes, but how?
Yes.
Yeah. So then to fast forward a little bit, and I want to go back to some of these days in between, but to fast forward, how did you get involved in American Ninja Warrior?
I had a friend who was on the show and did Ninja, and I just was at her house one day. I was playing with her kids, and I just kind of asked about Ninja, and she said, you should just sign up for Ninja competition and just see how you do and see how you like it. And then I signed up for one that was like 2 weeks later, and I loved it. I loved the movement of it, the swinging. It felt so different than climbing, but in a really amazing way. And then I joined a team, and then I competed on American Ninja Warrior Junior about 6 months later.
Was it from the get-go? Was it fun? Was it crazy? I watched that kind of like half with my hands over my eyes. I'm so worried about everybody. There's like, you're bumping, you're falling.
It was really fun. It's like a jungle gym. And I was not very good at it at first. Like I could not do any lower body obstacles. I mean, I was a climber. I could pull hard. I could do all that, but if you put me on my feet, can't do that at all. So it took a long time to get better at lower body obstacles and agility, but it definitely helped me a lot in climbing, and climbing translates to ninja really well. So they definitely work well with each other, where I don't have to like do two completely separate training things, do completely separate workouts. Like my climbing training and strength stuff really translates to ninja, that when I go to ninja, I just really need to work on tech and obstacles and running courses.
When you are competing, your diabetes technology is very noticeable. I noticed a Dexcom CGM on one arm, Omnipod on the other arm. Do you place them there because it keeps them out of the way? Would you mind talking a little bit about that? I assume also, well, I shouldn't assume. I wonder too if it's, so people can see them.
It's a mix. For my Omnipod, I always wear it on my arm. It's the most comfortable spot. If I wear it on my abdomen or like kind of on my lower back, it's not super comfortable, especially with a harness, and it just feels really big and bulky. And I'm actually sometimes allergic to the adhesive, so if I put it on my leg, I have a huge like allergic reaction. But for the arm, it's just the most comfortable spot, and I have the best absorption there. And then for the show, wearing it visible was important because I also knew that I was openly wanting to talk about type 1. And there's a little boy that I babysit who has type 1, and he said he didn't want to wear his Omnipod visible because he didn't want it to make him weird. And knowing that he felt that way, especially at such a young age, I know there's a lot of other people who feel that way and a lot of other teenage girls, and they have no reason to feel that way. And so if I could inspire one person to not feel like they have to hide it, then it was worth it to wear it visible. Because for type 1, I mean, there's obviously the visible portions of it, but so much of it realistically is invisible, especially competing and the things that I was managing that night, competing and women's, people had no clue that were going on. And it's important to talk about that and advocate for that, to understand that like there's so much going on that people don't know about, which is true in every aspect of life. But it was important to talk about that for me.
You make it look so easy. It's easy to see how people think, oh, that's no big deal. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about what you have to do. You've lived with type 1 now for 6 years. You've been competing at this incredibly high level. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what happens behind the scenes? I know you have a lot of questions about Afrezza. Every time I mention it, the emails and DMs come in. So what is it all about? Well, Afrezza is an ultra-rapid-acting mealtime insulin. You breathe it in using an oral inhaler. Afrezza gives you the flexibility to eat when you want while providing proven blood sugar control. Afrezza's ultra-rapid action allows you to inhale your insulin right when food arrives, even unexpectedly. So you can be spontaneous but still in control without the need for injections at mealtimes. Find out more, see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD or patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on Afrezza.com/safety. Now back to Katie, talking about what goes on behind the scenes at American Ninja Warrior.
So filming's overnight, and my numbers and how my body is obviously different overnight than it is during the day.
Wow.
And for Los Angeles, for semifinals in the regular season, my blood sugar was really low. I had poked after and it was like 28.
Whoa.
I was really dizzy. I felt like I was going to pass out the whole time. I could not see the obstacles. And the obstacle right before I fell, I have to jump to a bar. It's a salmon ladder. And I feel like I can't see the bar. It feels like it's moving. I can't focus. And some of my friends who saw my video could see it in my face. And then I ended up falling because I just couldn't precision the next thing, which is very frustrating because it happened so low, because adrenaline, my blood sugar will spike. And then as soon as the adrenaline's gone, it'll just dip, which it was raining. So I had an adrenaline spike and then it dipped right before I ran. So that was really frustrating that there was nothing I could quickly do about it in that moment. And I just had to go out there and compete. And then for women's was filmed all in one night. So figuring out how I wanted to eat was definitely hard because like the onset food isn't like fantastic. But right before stage 2, I was a little bit low and I had a few like the like honey stinger gummies because they feel like light and it'll like quickly bounce. So I was definitely low running stage 2, and then I was low again before stage 4. But I was like able to get ahead of it quickly enough that it wasn't terribly low that it like really affected my performance or felt like that was what I was focusing on. Yeah. But yeah, definitely a lot of behind the scene things that no one on set really sees or knows about.
It's wild. I remember several years ago, I talked to Colt Scott, who had been a course tester for American Ninja Warrior, and then he made the show. And he shared that they tape overnight. That's bananas. I mean, what time? Do you remember what time you won?
It was about 4:30.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And when I'm like holding the trophy up, we were joking because when they did the shot, you could kind of see that it was about to be sunrise. But yeah, it's so crazy because you have to like, leading up to filming, you have to flip your sleep schedule and like slowly start to go to bed earlier and earlier later and later and then wake up later, which is hard like with school and training because I have usually strength and conditioning in the morning and then climbing in the afternoon. And then the harder part is I was competing in climbing competitions almost every weekend leading up to that, which those are at like 8 a.m. So there's like a level that you have to like balance that out because then if my sleep schedule is fully flipped, then I have a hard time going to bed like early for climbing competitions. It is a brutal schedule, especially in Vegas when you're there for a week and you're competing. You're just so tired and you just want to go home.
Wow. I got a couple of questions from listeners, and I'm going to ask this one here because we were just talking about your blood sugar during that last competition when you won. And the question was about where were your blood sugars after you won? I'm wondering, I mean, I'm sure you weren't testing immediately after, but you know, during that time after the win, do you mind sharing a little bit about what happened?
Honestly, I do not remember where my glucose was.
Sure.
So we like finished, they told us at the bottom, they're like, okay, if you win, you need to do all of this stuff. I got up there and I looked at Addie and I was like, I don't remember what I was supposed to do. I remember nothing. The only thing I remember is don't hold the trophy over the edge. Like we were told to not do that. And Vegas is really hard because you're on a dirt lot and I already have asthma. So it was like, it's so hard to breathe, especially after running. Like they needed me to do an interview and I like could not talk and someone was like giving me a cough drop every like couple of minutes. I just remember like not being able to breathe, just wanting water. And then when we were like, you have to go downstairs, like down the tower, and the stairs the second time felt so terrible. Like our legs were just so tired. And then we like got to the ground and there was so much going on because they're trying to get us set. We need to sign paperwork. I need to do an interview. Like there's just so much going on. And I don't even think I had my phone. So I never was able to like really look at what my blood sugar was. There's just so much chaos.
I didn't realize you have asthma as well. You know, we could do a whole other episode on that. When were you diagnosed with asthma and how, I know this is a type 1 podcast, but you know, if you don't mind, how do you train with asthma as an athlete?
I don't even know when I was diagnosed. So I had a period of training where I was really, really struggling to breathe. And we already kind of knew I had asthma. I had an inhaler, but I was needing it a lot more. And I was on some asthma like medication. And then I don't even remember what tests we did. I think they did a scope. They also said that I had vocal cord dysfunction, which basically when you breathe, normally your vocal cords open. But for me, when I breathed, they closed, which made it really hard to breathe. So I had to do like speech therapy and all of this stuff during all of that, it's gotten a lot better. But Vegas is just, for anyone, it's so hard because it just feels like you have like dust in your lungs. And then when you run the course, you just can't breathe or talk.
That just knocked me back. I'm trying to think, gosh, is there, and this may be a very silly question. Fortunately, you know, I haven't had to deal with it with my son. Are there special things to think about with asthma in terms of type 1 and vice versa?
No, not really. They're like fully separate things. My asthma's not terrible. It's just like, if you put the asthma and the vocal cord dysfunction together, it's just can't breathe. But it's gotten a lot better. We just had to really up my cardio to just basically compensate for it. And then I had to like do certain breathing techniques while I'm running the course and like before in order to like get the deep breaths. And so that like as I can't breathe like more and more that I don't like start panicking because I just can't get a deep breath.
Oof. Yeah, that's scary. A couple of other questions that I got from listeners, mostly about training. Do you train with insulin on board? Do you mind sharing a little bit about, what you feel comfortable doing in terms of your dosing when you're training?
I mean, generally, yeah. Like, I don't have to really look at it and be like, okay, I have insulin on board. Like, I need to do a decrease. Like, I think my body's just so used to working out, and especially with type 1 as well, that like I can go into a session and have like 5 units on board and still be fine. But generally, if I as I start to drop, I'll just do a decrease and like hope that does enough. And then if it doesn't, then I'll just get a snack.
Yeah.
But it's just like figuring it out and figuring out your body and your patterns.
Yeah, everybody is so different. I'm almost reluctant to ask some of these questions. But this is one that might be fun. What are your favorite glucose snacks for pre-workout, during workout, and after?
Before and during are kind of the same. I do applesauce or like the little honey stinger gummies because they feel really light and then they work quickly. The applesauce, depending on where I'm at in my session or how I feel before, can sometimes make me nauseous if it's like a high cardio day or really intensive. So then I'll just do the honey stinger gummies. And then after, if I'm like leaving the gym and I'm kind of low, I'll just go get like a smoothie or something, or just have a bar that I have in my bag.
Again, knowing that everybody is different, I'm almost reluctant to ask this question too, but the question did come in like, do you eat any kind of special diet? If you do and you want to share that, that's great, but I'm almost uncomfortable asking that.
Oh, yeah. I'm not really on a diet. Like, I just really focus on eating whole and healthy foods because that's a diet, and calling that, at least for me, and especially in the culture that is climbing, it's a very slippery slope, and I have experienced it. And it's just, if I focus on like, okay, restricting things, then I'll slowly start restricting more and more and more, which does lead to eating disorder, which just is a really slippery slope, especially with the culture around that in climbing. So I try not to like restrict too much, just focus on like giving myself whole and just healthy food, stuff that fuels my body and not just whatever.
Yeah, no, that's great. Is the idea there, and forgive me again, I'm very ignorant of that culture, is the idea there to be as light as possible?
Generally, that's like how a lot of them start. And unfortunately, in climbing, the lighter you are, especially at a certain level, the harder you can climb, which has created a big problem in climbing, especially in the last few years. And it's really hard, especially as a youth athlete, as a female athlete, to not be like, okay, well, if that makes me climb harder, then why not make the sacrifices to do that? Because like for me too, like I have a really high pain tolerance, and I'd rather be able to be as strong as I can. Like if it means having pain or whatever, then like I'll do the thing, which is like really hard if that's like what I'm okay with doing, because then, it leads to starving yourself for 7 hours and not eating anything while you're at the gym just so you can climb harder, or not eating before competitions, which is hard. And it's also hard when you mix in type 1. Like, it's also easy to have an eating disorder around type 1 with fear of glucose or all the various things that come with that. And you add in type 1, and then you add in sports where it's like, well, the lighter I am, the stronger I can climb, the better my workouts are. So it's definitely something that I've had to work through, but it's important to like recognize that eventually that is not, it's not the healthiest option, and you can climb just as hard and perform at the same level while fueling your body properly.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, thanks for being open about it. It's gotta be difficult. But you mentioned a pain tolerance. You really got hurt in February of this year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you tore your ACL, you tore both sides of your meniscus. Oh my, what happened?
I was at a climbing competition. I was at the national team trials. It was the first day, the last boulder, the first round, and it was a new gym, so the mats were also super hard. I took a fall. I kind of hit it first. My knee kind of twisted, and I heard like 4 pops, and then I like screamed, and I had pain from my hip all the way down. But and then we found out the next day that I fully tore my ACL. Besides my meniscus, I had tearing in my MCL, LCL, and then I also tore like a connecting muscle to my hip, which is why I just had so much hip pain. And then I had surgery March 14th.
I am so sorry. That sounds horrible.
Yeah.
How are you doing now? How are you doing?
It's been a hard 3 months for sure. It was very disappointing. It was 2 weeks before filming. They were filming 2 seasons, and I was really looking forward to being someone as like a big name on the show and being the returning women's champion and doing all of that stuff and just getting to compete alongside so many of my friends who this is going to be their first year. And I'm missing a lot of things in climbing as well. I made the US speed team, so I've missed all the World Cups, unfortunately. So it's definitely heartbreaking to put so much into this. And I've wanted to do a World Cup since I started climbing.
Wow.
And so being 11 years into this and I was 4 weeks away from doing my first World Cup was heartbreaking it's on a different time frame, but it's hard to push something out when it was so close.
I think that in the public's mind, and I'm just really talking for me, I guess, it almost seems like, well, you got hurt, but then you did American Ninja Warrior and won because of the way the TV season made it look, right?
Yeah.
But obviously that was last year. But as you do look ahead, it sounds like you're still optimistic that you'll compete.
Yeah, I will. It takes about a year to get back to where I was.
Wow.
Unfortunately, the ACL is a very long and brutal recovery, but it takes about a year to get back to where you were and really 2 years until it feels like it never happened to your knee. But yeah, I competed in a climbing competition last weekend. I was just like on a rope and stuff, and I qualified for nationals, which was really cool because I didn't think I would have. So I'm hoping I will be able to do the last World Cup of the year, because if I can't, then the 2024 Olympics are out, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that I will be cleared to speed climb by then.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for sure. We'll be rooting for you. The Olympic sport, what is that? Forgive my ignorance. It's sports climbing?
So there's 3 disciplines in climbing. There's bouldering, which you just fall onto a mat and you go about 15 feet up. There is sport climbing, where you are attached to a rope, and it's anywhere from 40 to generally 60 feet, like in a gym at least. And then there's speed climbing, which is a 15-meter wall. It's the same route, and you just do it as fast as you can. I am on this USA speed team this year, and for the Olympics, they put sport climbing and bouldering together, and then speed climbing is its own discipline. So the World Cups qualify you for just all the stuff that leads up to the Olympics for this next year.
You have said, I don't need easy, I just need possible. I hate that you have not gotten easy this year.
Yeah, it's been a year, and it's hard dealing with a year-long ending injury, especially right before team trials. I was actually talking to my therapist about this, about how it's so scary to think about like everything could be over in 2 seconds. And we're like, well, at least we don't really have to worry about that right now. And then 2 weeks later, it was all over in 2 seconds. And it was hard because I had surgery the day before I was supposed to compete on the qualifying course of Ninja Warrior. And that was a really hard night because everybody, and I'm so, so happy for them. It's just so hard when I don't also get to do it with them and get to walk across that stage again, especially which now we don't think it will be, but at that time, we kind of thought this was going to be the last year of Ninja Warrior. So that was definitely hard to also maybe be okay with. It takes a lot of processing and just figuring out what I want next and how we're going to make this work and figure out all the ways that I can become a better climber and a better athlete, because there's a lot of growth and learning that I can do throughout this period of this injury.
Katie, I just want to ask you if I could. You mentioned your therapist, and this is your personal life. You do not have to go into this, but I didn't want it to go by because I want to just applaud you for saying that and to kind of bring that out a little bit. We don't talk at all enough about mental health with diabetes, with sports. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that? Not what you talk about with your therapist, but kind of what led you to talk to one at all?
It's been mentally a hard couple years. In July of 2021, nationals was really hard, diabetes related. If at a climbing competition, my blood sugar is too low or too high, they'll put me in the back of the running order, which at this nationals, my blood sugar was in the 40s. They pulled me from the run order. I was fully warmed up, and now I'm going to compete like 2 or 3 hours later, which fully messes up my warm-up. And then 3 hours later, when I was supposed to climb again, it was even lower. I was in the 30s. They almost pulled me from the competition. I am in ISO crying. I wasn't able to really warm up again. And by the time I finally went out to compete, I had about 15 applesauce and like a ton of grapes as well. And I still competed with it being 40. My glucose never even went high afterward. I was like 120 after everything somehow. And then I had to compete. I made finals. I had to compete in finals later that afternoon. And I felt so sick from the applesauce. I was so mentally drained. Like it was a lot for me. And I did not do well in finals, which was really heartbreaking that it was related to diabetes and all of that it felt like type 1 won. And I was just so mentally drained after that. Like I didn't want to compete the rest of the week. I still had like 4 or 5 more days of this. And it was hard to just show up the next day and compete. But just living with type 1 is not easy. And then competing at a high level and competing in 2 sports is really hard as well. And then you put both together. It's hard. It's hard to just train and sometimes just show up to the gym. But I have a coach who we talk through it all with. And then, my therapist to just work through it all. Me being mentally okay. It's the first step in all of this. In order of priorities, it's me first before it's sports, and me as an athlete, like it's me as a person and before I'm an athlete. And it's important to make sure that I am okay and to do all the things to be in that place.
I'm only pausing and I'm trying to figure out how to say this without sounding condescending at all or like a mom. But it's hard to believe you are 17, Katie. You are so well-spoken. You are so mature. These thoughts are things that I think a lot of professional athletes don't come to until they're much older, that they've got to put themselves first. So thank you for all of that. Going back to the competition. First, I was kind of mad at the announcers. They were talking about how short you were. They were talking about what you weighed. And I know that's part of their job, but I was like, have you seen that? I was like, come on, guys. But I also noticed you had a whole team of people there rooting you on, wearing these, I am greater than the highs and lows t-shirts that look like they're specially made with climbing and for you. Can you talk a little bit about that support? Like most of you, we don't love worrying about insurance. I'm thrilled to tell you that Dexcom CGM is covered as a medical benefit for 98% of commercial insurance plan holders who have type 1 diabetes. And more plans cover CGM for people with type 2 who use insulin. We even have it as a pharmacy benefit, so I can process it at the local pharmacy. They put it on auto refill for me, which makes it really easy. It's one less thing to think about. It's worth checking to see if that's available to you. Dexcom will even help you do the benefits check to see what your insurance covers. It's easy. It's right on the website. Dexcom is the #1 covered CGM brand. Learn more. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Now back to Katie, talking about the people who support her.
I have such a great support system, which is really important as an athlete and as a T1D and just as a person. A lot of them are ninjas and family and climbing friends. Like, it's so incredible to just see everyone supporting each other. In Ninja, you're competing with these people and then you're on their sidelines screaming your head off and wanting them to do the absolute best that they can possibly do, which is an incredible culture. And everyone understands what everyone is going through as well. And you finish competing and we're just in hotel rooms talking about what everyone is kind of going through and just how we're feeling about Vegas. And the first day we actually walked onto set, Vegas is huge. It's like, you're like 30 feet in the air over water and it's terrifying. And I actually had a panic attack on the first day we went up there, which was very new because I'm not like afraid of heights or anything. And I freaked out. And then I was in one of my friend's hotel room and we could like see the course in the hotel room. And I just like started crying. I was just genuinely so scared. And I was so scared that I had to actually go on the course again, which is really hard. And it was over the last year, I've dealt with more anxiety and panic attacks and all of that. So working through that so that I can compete without those happening has also been a big thing.
With Omnipod, I got this question from somebody. Athletes who wear tubed systems will often disconnect. Do you have any issues with it knocking off or anything like that? I was watching it during the competition. And it looked, it stayed on the whole time.
Yeah, no, it generally does good. Sometimes when I'm climbing, like I'll knock it off with like a rope or an auto belay. But I also just like so used to it that like without even noticing, I'll just like kind of move the rope so that I don't knock it off. Yeah. But no, just on the show with the water and everything. I don't think I've ever knocked it off in Ninja. I have in climbing, but that's also a very different movement. And then I have a friend he is type 1 and he competed on the show. He has like the tube system. So then before he's competing, he has to like disconnect it and everything.
You said towards the beginning of our interview that when you were diagnosed, people were telling you about athletes with type 1, you were looking up other folks that you might be able to emulate. You are now one of those people, Katie, right? Kids diagnosed now, and even adults diagnosed now, are going to look you up and find out, oh my gosh, I can climb. I can be a ninja. I can have asthma and type 1 and do all of these things. Has that sunk in yet? What's that like?
It's so crazy to me, the difference that I have and will make, because going on the show last year, just getting on and walking across the stage was a huge win for me, because I got to share my story and hopefully inspire even just one person was my goal, because it was so much bigger than me. It was about so much more than just competing or being on TV. And then I cleared the qualifying course and it blew up everywhere. And I had so many people with type 1 reach out, and I was just reading the comments, and so many parents and their kids have type 1, they were telling me all of their stories and what their kids would say when they saw me compete. And there was one that I remember, and her 4-year-old daughter is type 1. She watched it. She wanted to watch it again. And then she looked at her mom and said, "I can do anything, mommy." And the comments like that were just so amazing, that I made that difference and that I can be that person and that source of inspiration, and you actually can do and achieve anything regardless of whatever your circumstances are and regardless of type 1.
What's next for you this summer and this year? I know you've got your eyes on more qualifying and recovering from your injury.
I will be going to Children's Congress in July, and I attended as a delegate in 2019. And this year I'm on the celebrity role model panel, which is really cool, because I remember just thinking about how cool it would be to get to do that and just be talking to everyone when I attended. So now being that person is amazing. I'm just lots of different public speaking engagements. I'll be going to a diabetes camp to hang out with some of the kids at the end of July. And then I also wrote a portion of something that'll be going into a book that'll come out later this fall. But it's called Rebel Girls, which I'm really excited to see that as well.
Katie, thank you so much for sharing not only your time, but really just being so open about everything that's going on. I mean, I know you're trying to inspire people, but I think you may have in ways that you may not have realized today. I really appreciate your time. And like I said, just being so open, and we wish you all the best. I hope you come back on in the future. I'd love to talk to you again.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh, thank you. And congratulations and continued recovery. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Much more about Katie Bone at diabetes-connections.com. Just click on this episode's homepage. I will link up the video of her big win that I mentioned and we heard at the beginning of the show. And I love watching that. I mean, she's amazing to watch, but it's fun to watch her supporters that she mentioned as well. Her mom is there. Can you imagine how nervous they all must be? It's absolutely incredible. A couple of quick things before I let you go. Mom's Night Out. Registration is rock and rollin'. We are open in Providence, Frisco, Texas, and in Charlotte, North Carolina. Go to diabetes-connections.com. Click on Mom's Night Out. There's a banner at the top. You can also click on events. I know most of you who listen are not moms of kids with type 1, but if you could share that with your communities, it would go a long way. I really appreciate that. These events have become really special to me, and I'm excited to announce more before the end of the summer. And as I've been saying for a while, I'm going to the American Diabetes Association Scientific Sessions Conference, and that happens this week. I've posted in the Facebook group. I'm curious what you want me to cover, who you want to hear from. So if you haven't already done that, please join the Facebook group and weigh in. If you're in the group and you haven't seen it, thanks a lot, Facebook. You know how that kind of stuff goes. Go in there and search around a little bit, and I hope you can find it pretty easily because I am super excited to go. It's my first time. I'm going as media. I got my pass. I have no idea. Hopefully there's a room for me to do interviews, but like I said, I've never been there. So I'm bringing my podcast stuff, and I will do my best to bring you lots of news and information from ADA. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
Before you go, I just want to tell you about AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. I gave AG1 a try because I'm not the best vitamin taker, and I really wanted a single solution that supports my entire body and covers my nutritional bases every day. I've been telling you I drink AG1 in a smoothie. That is how I prefer it. I make a really simple one. Sometimes it's just ice and spinach and AG1, maybe a little fruit and honey. Sometimes I get more adventurous and throw whatever is in the freezer in there. But topping it off with a scoop of AG1 makes me feel really ready to go, like I'm doing something good for my body. My husband will just put it in a glass of water, stir it up, and he likes it that way. AG1 is raising the standard for quality in the supplement category. Science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients. We now get AG1 delivered monthly, so neither of us has to think about it. I like that. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/Stacey. That's drinkag1.com/STACEY. Check it out.